Have you ever walked into a room and just felt defeated? That was my workshop. Every single day. We're talking about a space that was probably smaller than your average walk-in closet. It was supposed to be my creative escape, the place where I could bring ideas to life with wood and tools. Instead, it had become a source of constant frustration. Every project started with a 20-minute treasure hunt. I'd have to move 3 things to find a 4th, only to realize the tool I needed was buried under a pile of scrap wood. It was a chaotic mess, and frankly, it was killing my motivation to create anything at all. The real problem wasn't just the mess, it was the inefficiency. Simple tasks took forever. Let's say I needed to make a simple cut on the table saw. First, I'd have to clear off the saw's surface, which was always covered in tools, screws, and sawdust. Then, I'd have to shuffle around a pile of lumber just to find the piece I needed. The floor was an obstacle course of power cords and offcuts. I was spending more time fighting my space than actually building things. The joy was gone, replaced by a nagging feeling that I was just spinning my wheels. It felt like the room itself was working against me. I hit my breaking point on a Saturday morning. I had a simple plan: build a small bookshelf for my daughter. It should have been a fun, easy project, but after an hour of just trying to clear enough space to work, I gave up. I stood in the middle of the chaos, surrounded by tools I couldn't find and materials I couldn't reach, and I almost threw in the towel. I thought, maybe I just don't have enough space for this hobby. It was a discouraging thought, and for a moment, I believed it. My workshop wasn't a powerhouse. It was a punishment. That moment of defeat turned into a moment of decision. I realized something had to change, and it wasn't the size of the room. I couldn't just knock down a wall and magically create more square footage. The change had to come from how I used the space I already had. The problem wasn't the workshop. It was my system, or lack thereof. I decided right then and there to stop complaining about the size of my shop and start making it work for me. The challenge was clear. Transform this tiny, chaotic box into a lean, mean productivity machine, and I was going to do it without spending a fortune. There's a big myth in the world of woodworking, and a lot of other hobbies too. The myth is that you need a giant, sprawling workshop to do serious, high-quality work. You see these massive shops online, with acres of floor space and every tool imaginable, and you start to believe that's the only way. I bought into that lie for a long time. I would dream about having a 3-car garage dedicated to my tools, thinking that more space would automatically make me a better woodworker. I used my tiny room as an excuse for not finishing projects, or for my work not being as good as I wanted. But the truth is, a big space can be just as disorganized and inefficient as a small one. I've seen huge workshops that are just as chaotic as my little room was. The owner spends half their time walking from one end to the other just to grab a clamp or a pencil. A big messy shop is still a messy shop. The real key to productivity isn't the square footage, it's the workflow. It's about how easily you can move from one task to the next. It's about having your tools and materials exactly where you need them, right when you need them. A well-organized small shop will always beat a poorly planned large one. Think about a professional kitchen. Chefs often work in very tight, compact spaces, but everything is organized for maximum efficiency. Every pot, pan, knife, and ingredient has a specific place. This system, called mise en place, means everything in its place. They can produce incredible meals at high speed because their workspace is designed for a logical flow of actions. I realized that this was the mindset I needed to bring into my workshop. I needed to stop thinking about the space I wished I had and start thinking like a chef about the space I actually had. So, I officially challenged the idea that I was limited by my tiny room. The limitation wasn't physical, it was mental. It was a lack of planning and a failure to think strategically about my setup. My goals shifted. It wasn't about getting a bigger shop anymore, it was about creating a smarter shop. I wanted to prove to myself and to anyone else working in a small space that you can be incredibly productive and create amazing things with less. You just have to be intentional and organized. The size of your shop doesn't define your potential. Your system does. With my new mindset, I was ready to get to work, not with a saw, but with a pencil and paper. Before I moved a single tool, I sat down and made a plan. This is the most important step, and it's one that too many people skip. They start moving things around without a clear goal and end up with a different kind of mess. I grabbed a notepad and started by listing all my frustrations. Tools are hard to find, surfaces are always cluttered. I trip over cords, the floor is covered in scrap wood. This list of problems became my checklist for solutions. Next, I focused on 3 key principles that would guide my entire transformation: storage, mobility, and accessibility. Storage was about getting things off the floor and off my main workbench. I needed a designated home for every single tool, screw, and piece of sandpaper. Mobility was about making my space flexible. Since I couldn't have dedicated stations for everything, I needed my main tools and work surfaces to be on wheels. This would let me reconfigure the shop for different tasks. Accessibility meant that the tools I use most often should be the easiest to grab, without needing to move something else out of the way first. I started sketching out a new layout for the room. I drew the walls, the door, and the window to scale. Then I made little paper cutouts for my major tools: the table saw, the workbench, and the miter saw. I spent a whole evening just moving these little paper squares around on my drawing. I was trying to find the most logical arrangement. I thought about the workflow for a typical project. I would cut a board at the miter saw, then maybe move it to the table saw, and finally take it to the workbench for assembly. My layout needed to make that sequence as smooth as possible, with minimal steps in between. This planning phase was incredibly valuable. It forced me to think through every detail before I committed to building or buying anything. I decided that the back wall would be perfect for a full-height, modular storage system. My main workbench would be on heavy-duty casters, so I could roll it into the center of the room for big assembly jobs or push it against a wall to open up floor space. I also planned for specific zones: a finishing station, a hardware cabinet, and a dedicated spot for lumber storage. The plan wasn't fancy, but it was a roadmap. It gave me confidence that I could actually pull this off. The first major project in my workshop transformation was tackling the biggest clutter magnet: my tool collection. My hand tools were scattered everywhere, in drawers, on shelves, and piled on my workbench. Finding a specific screwdriver or chisel was always a frustrating search. The solution, honestly, was to go vertical. Walls are probably the most underutilized real estate in any small space. So, I decided to dedicate the largest wall in my shop to a modular tool wall, which is often called a French cleat system. This system is brilliant because it's so simple and incredibly flexible, which is just perfect for a space that needs to adapt. A French cleat wall is basically a series of horizontal wooden strips mounted to the wall. Each strip has a 45-degree angle cut along its top edge. Then you build custom holders for each of your tools, and each holder has a corresponding 45-degree angle on its back. This lets you simply hang any tool holder on any of the wall cleats. You can move things around in seconds without any tools at all. If you get a new tool, you just build a new holder for it. If you find you're not using a tool very often, you can move it to a higher, less accessible spot. It's a completely customizable system. Building the system was a pretty straightforward woodworking project. I used inexpensive plywood to create the cleats and mounted them securely to the studs in the wall. Then came the fun part: designing and building the custom holders. I made a rack for my screwdrivers, a shelf for my hand planes, a magnetic strip for my marking knives and pencils, and individual holders for all my clamps. Each holder was designed to make the tool easy to see and easy to grab. The process of building these holders was honestly satisfying, because with each one I completed, I could feel my shop getting more organized. The impact of the tool wall was immediate and, well, dramatic. Suddenly, dozens of tools that had been cluttering up my horizontal surfaces were now neatly organized on the wall. My workbench was completely clear for the first time in years. The visual effect was also powerful. Instead of seeing a chaotic mess, I saw a clean, orderly display of my tools. It made the room feel bigger and more professional. Finding a tool was no longer a search. It was a simple reach. This single upgrade probably did more to improve my workflow than any other change I made. With my hand tools neatly stored on the wall, the next big problem to solve was the lack of flexible workspace. My old workbench was big, heavy, and stationary. It was stuck in one spot, and it dictated the flow of the entire room. If I needed to cut a large sheet of plywood, I was out of luck because I just couldn't create enough open floor space. The solution was to put my workshop on wheels. Mobility is honestly a superpower in a small shop, and my main target for this upgrade was a new mobile workstation that would serve as the heart of my new setup. I decided to build a new workbench from scratch, designed specifically for my needs and my small space. The plan was for a sturdy bench, about 3 feet by 5 feet, made from 2x4s and a thick plywood top. The most important feature, though, was the set of 4 heavy-duty locking casters I installed on the bottom. These weren't cheap little plastic wheels. These were serious casters that could handle hundreds of pounds and roll smoothly over small cracks and sawdust. With a simple press of my foot, I could lock the bench firmly in place or unlock it to move it anywhere in the shop. The design of the bench also incorporated more storage. The entire area underneath the top was turned into open shelving. This space became the new home for my portable power tools, like my circular saw, sanders, and routers, all stored in their original cases. Now, instead of being piled in a corner, they were organized and easy to access right from my main work area. I could roll the bench to wherever I was working and have all the necessary power tools right there with me. It was honestly like having a rolling command center for my projects. This mobile workstation completely changed how I could use my tiny room. For most tasks, I could keep it pushed against the wall to maximize my open floor space. When I needed to assemble a large project or work on all 4 sides of a piece, I could roll it out into the middle of the room in seconds. It also served as an outfeed table for my table saw. I could roll it into position to support long boards as they came off the saw. This single, mobile piece of furniture made my small shop feel like it had 3 or 4 different layouts, all available whenever I needed them. Once the big pieces, the tool wall and the mobile workbench, were in place, it was time to focus on the little details that make a huge difference. These are the things that often get overlooked, but they can be major sources of frustration and inefficiency. I'm talking about the 3 big enemies of a clean and safe workshop: dust, cable clutter, and poor lighting. Tackling these issues was really the final piece of the puzzle in creating a truly productive space. A workshop can be organized, but if it's dusty, dark, and you're tripping over cords, it's still not a pleasant place to be. First up was dust collection. Woodworking creates a ton of sawdust, and in a small enclosed space, it gets everywhere. It's bad for your health and makes a huge mess. I couldn't fit a large, central dust collection system, so I opted for a 2-part solution. I bought a good quality shop vacuum with a fine particle filter. Then I added a cyclone dust separator. This simple device sits on top of a 5-gallon bucket and connects between the tool and the shop vacuum. It uses centrifugal force to drop the heavy dust and chips into the bucket before they ever reach the vacuum's filter, which keeps the vacuum running at full power and saves money on filters. Next, I declared war on cable clutter. Power cords were always tangled on the floor, creating a serious tripping hazard. My solution was to install several overhead electrical outlets. I ran extension cords up the wall and across the ceiling, securing them properly. I then installed retractable cord reels. Now, when I need power for a tool, I can just pull a cord down from the ceiling to the exact length I need. When I'm done, a quick tug sends the cord retracting neatly back into its housing. This got all the cords off the floor, making the space safer and much easier to clean. Finally, I addressed the lighting. My shop had a single dim light bulb in the center of the ceiling, which created shadows in all the worst places. Good lighting is critical for safety and for doing accurate work. I replaced the single bulb with 2 long LED shop lights. These fixtures are bright, energy efficient, and honestly easy to install. The difference was like night and day, literally. The entire room was filled with bright, even light. I also added a flexible arm task lamp to my workbench for when I needed focused light for detailed work like carving or finishing. Taming these little details made the workshop not just more productive, but also safer and more enjoyable. The day finally came when all the planning and hard work paid off. I stood at the door of my workshop and took it all in. The transformation was honestly stunning. The room that was once a chaotic, frustrating mess was now a clean, bright, and incredibly organized space. It was the same small room, but it felt twice as big. Every tool had a home on the French cleat wall, arranged for a logical workflow. The floor was clear of cords and scrap wood. My new mobile workbench sat in the middle of the room, ready for action. It wasn't just a collection of tools in a room anymore, it was a cohesive system. The first project I tackled in the new space was the bookshelf for my daughter, the very project that had defeated me weeks earlier. This time, the experience was completely different. I grabbed the lumber from its dedicated storage rack. I made my cuts at the miter saw, which had its own small station. I moved the pieces to the mobile workbench for sanding and assembly. Every tool I needed was within arm's reach on the tool wall. The shop vacuum connected easily to my sander, keeping dust to a minimum. The entire process was smooth, efficient, and most importantly, fun. I finished the bookshelf in a single afternoon. This experience taught me a powerful lesson. For years, I had blamed the size of my shop for my lack of productivity. I thought I needed more square footage, more expensive tools, or a bigger budget. I was wrong. The problem was never the space. It was the lack of a smart system. By focusing on organization, mobility, and workflow, I had unlocked the hidden potential of my tiny workshop. Every small improvement, the tool wall, the mobile bench, the cord reels, the better lighting, compounded to create a massive impact on the usability of the space. So, as you look at your own workspace, whether it's a garage, a spare room, or just a corner of your apartment, don't get discouraged by its size. The most important tool you have is your ability to think creatively about how you use it. An efficient setup will always be more valuable than a large one. You can absolutely do more with less. The real question isn't about how much space you have, it's about how you choose to use it. Now I have to ask, what's the one thing your workspace needs most to become more productive? Let me know in the comments below.